Yeah, I'm not hearing anyone talk down there though. Oh, they can hear me.
All right, it's 6 p.m. and I am going to get the city council meeting up and running. I'm going to call it to order. Will you all please stand with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to roll call. Councilman Loy,
Here.
Councilwoman Kesty,
Present.
Councilwoman Diamond,
Present.
Councilman Henderson,
Here.
Councilman Koch,
Present.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
and Councilman Lavaca has not arrived yet, so we'll just put a hold and see when he's going to be coming in. I think he'll be coming in any minute. I think he comes at a distance for these meetings. Okay, moving on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion,
I'll
Madam Mayor.
second that.
Thank you. I have a motion by Councilwoman Kesty, seconded by Councilwoman Diamond. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I was just checking to see if maybe he was online, Councilman Lavaca, but he's not. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda, items 1 through 13. Do I have a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
may I just pull one and then recuse myself from number 13, please?
Number 13. Yes. Okay. So let's just go ahead and move forward. We'll do 1 through 12. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries for items 1 through 12 on the consent agenda. And Councilwoman Kesty, did you want to?
I just wanted to thank you guys for moving forward with the minutes and providing that extra name for public comment. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, so you had us pull number 13.
That was just to recuse myself for being on the Sedro-Woolley Museum Board.
Okay.
And so since we're one of them on there, I'm just going to recuse myself from that.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. My apologies, I misunderstood what you were asking there. So I will put it out there on the consent agenda, item number 13. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Excellent. Motion carries. Moving on now. Hello, Councilman Lavaca. Councilman Lavaca has just arrived. Excellent. Yes. Are you talking about the minutes? I said items 1 through 13, and she only pulled 13. Well, we do have to, well. I misheard. Okay, I did say 1 through 13, we all passed it, okay. Okay. Moving on to item F, an introduction of a special guest, and we do have a presentation here from our new, she's been here about 2 months, Director of Strategic Initiatives for North Star, Monica Negrilla. Hello there.
Hello, Madam Mayor. Good evening, council members. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Monica Negrilla, and I am the new Director of Strategic Initiatives with Skagit County. My primary role currently is supporting and leading the North Star Initiative. And so with that, tonight, thank you again for having us here tonight. Also, Skagit County Commissioner Lisa Jennings is in the room. We are here to provide you with an update on some of the work happening at North Star currently. And also, I hope to provide you some highlights of the work that we have planned for next year. I would like to invite you also to the council convening next week, and I also have a few questions at the end. Would love to have a dialogue tonight or later on. I'm open for meetings, and I would love to hear your thoughts on next steps. So with that, next slide, please. Thank you for those, the IT team helping with that. Actually, next slide, since I just covered that. Thank you. So yes, I'm also here to introduce myself. As Mayor Johnson mentioned, I've been in this position for almost 2 months. I started on October 1st. And I'm very, very grateful to be part of this community now. I met wonderful people so far. I also had a chance to meet some of you, and I look forward to meeting some more. My prior work was at the city of Issaquah, where I was leading the human services initiatives there, from responding to homelessness, behavioral health program with the police department, and administering the grants that the city was giving out to the community. I'm very familiar with government work. I spent about almost 6 years at the city of Issaquah. However, most of my experience has been in the behavioral health system. For about 15 years prior to joining the city, I worked in the nonprofit world. I'm also a licensed mental health counselor and substance use disorder professional, and I worked in various roles, including leading an outpatient agency that was providing mental health services, substance use disorder services, and vocational rehabilitation. I'm a big fan, and I believe in rehabilitation through employment. So that's a big passion of mine in allowing people to recover through employment. So originally, I am from Romania. I was born and raised there. My father was Hungarian. My mom is Romanian, so I'm hopefully a good mix of both. I spent, though, the last 20 years in the United States, and I feel like this is my home now, and I'm very, very grateful for all the opportunities that I had to experience here. So, and again, grateful for being here tonight. So next slide, please. So next I'm gonna cover a few of the highlights and accomplishments of North Star so far. Many of you have been part of this work for the past couple of years. Next slide, please. And I'm very, very thankful for that, because as a newcomer to the community, and as I've been here for less than 2 months, I know that you created a solid foundation for this work, so thank you for that. Really, North Star started in 2022, and I know Commissioner Janicki has been part of this work, and really the systemic work cannot be done without the driving forces behind this work. And so what you see on the screen are really the values and the driving forces behind North Star, which are pretty simple. There are 3. On one end, we believe that no one in our community should live on the street or in the car, or die in the street or in their car. Also, we believe that everyone should get the services that they need when they need them. And as many of us are familiar with the behavioral health system, it's pretty broken, and many things are not working with it currently. And last but not least, we also believe that the North Star partners and everyone involved in this community, if they want to be part of it, they should be part of it. And we believe that we cannot do this alone, and we are stronger together. Next slide, please. So beyond the driving forces behind North Star, there was also a strategic planning component in this work. And part of that strategic planning effort led to really 3 big buckets of work under North Star. So if you will, North Star really focuses on 3 things. On one end, we want to create a durable, sustainable government, staffing, and funding to sustain this body of work. We also would like to create and help support an effective community-based system of care where, again, everyone gets the support that they need where they need it. And primarily, this can be also a support for our first responders, both fire and police, as you know, currently do not have a place to drop off people. And most of the time, they need to take people to jail and the ER, which is very costly and often just continues that revolving door of where people keep on coming back to the system without becoming sustainable and good contributors to the community. And last but not least, North Star also would like to focus on creating a system where everyone has stable and safe housing in our community. And that can mean really focusing on the wide continuum of services, providing housing that is affordable for those who work in the community, live in the community, and for those who struggle as well. Next slide, please. So without focusing too much, as I mentioned, the strategic planning process led to creating those 3 pillars, and under each of those pillars, specific goals were were created. I'm not going to spend much time on this slide, so next slide, please, because the next one provides a more comprehensive information on some of the things that were accomplished to date. So, for example, under durable governance, staffing, and funding, the North Star Initiative created structures in place where it functions with a leadership team. The leadership team is comprised by the mayors of the 4 cities in the Skagit County, and as well as the county commissioners. The initiative also has a series of working groups and task forces and an advisory group. I know that some of you are serving on the advisory group. Some of you are also serving on the different task forces. Currently, there are 3 task forces working on this initiative. There is a recovery task force, a housing task force, and more recently, we created a co-responder task force. I'm very, very grateful for all the staff that have been involved and continue to be involved. From your planning staff, thank you to Nicole. From your first responders, thank you so much, Chief Wagner and his team, and also for council members who are part of those advisory groups. I'm also grateful to say that under this goal, I was hired. I am the first dedicated staff for this initiative. I'm very, very humbled and grateful for being here, and I really see my role as being that golden thread, or maybe silver thread, or just a thread. That my hope is that I can bring the communities together, that maybe we can learn from each other. I would love to see opportunities for the other jurisdictions and for the county to learn from all the great work in Sedro-Woolley, and for sharing and collaboration. And again, with that driving force, believing that we cannot do this alone and that we are stronger together. A few other highlights and accomplishments so far. I think North Star has been successful in the last couple of years, together with all the other jurisdictions and the county commissioners, to secure over $40 million in new funding to go in our to support our communities, and I think that is worth celebrating. For a community of this size, securing $40 million, it's not a small task. So again, I want to thank you all for being part of that, and I hope that we can just continue to bring more revenues to the region. You're familiar with the Skagit Star Center right here, located in Sedro-Woolley. That is in process of being built. The second stage of the Skagit Star Center. The breaking ground happened earlier this year. It is scheduled to be completed by the end of next year. I think a lot of highlights for that program. It will provide a total of 48 inpatient beds and a great resource for the first responders to drop off people in crisis. So it's going to have 16 detox beds, 16 co-occurring treatment beds, and 16 other observation beds. So very, very grateful for that. And again, thank you. The coordinated entry system was revamped, implemented Gelada as a care coordination system that allows those who provide outreach and those who are first responders to better coordinate between the different jurisdictions. In addition to that, under the housing bucket, many thanks to the planning team, the planners from the different cities got together and looked at joint policies that each of the cities could tackle on, and making it easier for investors who perhaps would be willing to provide more housing into the community. If we have a set of policies that are aligned, that can make it easier during the permitting process, and for those investors, instead of having to look through a variety of policies that are very, very different. A lot more work needs to be done in that area, but more recently, you might be familiar with a call to action that the Housing Task Force put together in just releasing and making those policy and regulatory changes easier for investors. Last but not least, there were funds secured for additional funds secured for temporary housing. As I mentioned before, with the $40 million, a lot of funding was secured for the permanent supportive housing at Martha's Place, for the First Step home. Just recently, the county commissioners also approved the increase of some of the pallet shelters for the First Step Center, and we are grateful for that partnership with Mount Vernon just to create more shelter opportunities for the community. Next step, please. Next slide, please. So what's next? I'm going to talk for just a couple of minutes about some of the planned activities for 2025 and beyond. Next slide, please. Again, we have the work broken out under the 3 pillars, the strategic pillars. So under durable, sustainable government, funding and staffing, we hope to continue to strengthen the collaboration with our city partners, and we would like to look and explore opportunities for a interlocal agreement. We would like to also explore other opportunities to secure additional funding through the 2025 state legislative agenda to bring more resources to the community and to the region. As I mentioned earlier, we have already some systems in place. We have a variety of work groups and task forces. We would like to enhance those mechanisms and make sure that people who are involved in this work, they're going to be involved in a more meaningful way, that we are not going to waste their time, and that they're going to utilize their expertise in a helpful way so we can all drive in the same direction. And last but not least, we have a lot of partners, service providers who continue to reach out to us and they want to be part of this work. So we want to look into creating opportunities for those who want to be part of this work to be part of this work. So we are going to also explore opportunities to increase those partnership opportunities. Next slide, please. Under creating an effective community-based system of care, we have a few action items. On one end, as I mentioned earlier, we just started a task force focused on the corresponder work. So we really would like to explore opportunities there and find ways to identify what are the existing strengths of the corresponder programs that exist. Again, congratulations. I know that Sedro-Woolley is partnering with the City of Burlington in creating an MIH program. And we would love to learn from your work. But we also know there are a couple of other programs in the county who provide similar or very different work. So our goal really is going to be to focus on identifying those strengths, identify where the gaps are, and work together as a region to tackle those gaps. We would like to also expand on the existing recovery support services, and again, identifying the gaps and looking where opportunities are. And last but not least, we talked about the Skagit North Star Center, and we are also going to continue to expand the use of the case management system that allows first responders and outreach workers to collaborate. So we are going to also expand Gelada. Next slide, please. On the housing piece, our goal is twofold. We would like to continue regulatory policy opportunities where we can all align our work. And then we also would like to look into, of course, expanding the housing, creating a pipeline for additional housing. So we would like to expand housing opportunities for all. Currently, we are exploring 2 options, one for a possible pilot for a transitional housing program, and we are also looking at repurposing one of the existing programs into a new recovery program or transitional housing program. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation about goals for North Star. I only have 2 more slides. Thank you so much for your patience with me, and I'm available for questions in just a minute. What you see on the screen is an invitation to the North Star convening. This is the council convening that we started doing about a year and a half ago. We convene twice a year, and we would like to invite all council members from all the jurisdictions in joining us to, again, hear more about updates, put our heads together, and looking at what and how can we work together as a region. So the next North Star convening is coming up next week. I believe you might have received an invitation earlier, but just a reminder, we would love to see you there. It's at McIntyre Hall next Tuesday on December 3rd from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So we hope to see you there. And then next slide, please. So after all of this, and I apologize if I was going with 200 miles an hour, I would love the opportunity to have a conversation, whether it's tonight, would love to hear any thoughts and feedback. I'm also available for in-person meetings or virtual meetings, more individually or tonight, but would love to hear some of your thoughts on the following. How do you see the North Star benefiting your community? And what do we need to do to get there? So if you don't see it benefiting your community, what can we do to get there to where you might feel that North Star could benefit your community? Second question that I have for you, how can we strike the right balance as we are looking at all these services and supporting the most vulnerable in the community? What are your thoughts about striking the right balance between offering support for everyone and also maintaining accountability? Third, how can we strengthen coordination between the county and your jurisdiction, Sedro-Woolley? And what investments will have the biggest impact in solving multiple problems at once? I know that's a lot of questions. Again, I welcome any feedback, any questions. And again, thank you so much for allowing me to be here tonight.
Thank you, Monica. Always a joy. Does anybody, go ahead, Councilman Burns?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Monica, for coming here tonight. I appreciate your presentation and the work that you're all doing at North Star. Did I hear you right, the First Step Center, that there would be housing in Mount Vernon for that too? Is that new, or did I miss that along the way?
If the First Step Center at Mount Vernon, I'm sorry, do you mind repeating? What
Yes,
the
I thought
question
I
is about?
caught you saying that the First Step Center, there would be housing in Mount Vernon. I thought we only had it in Burlington. Is there?
I'm sorry, yes,
Oh,
it's
okay.
not Mount Vernon, it's in Burlington. Yes, you're absolutely right. Apologies.
I thought they might be expanding to a new location,
No,
so
no,
I was
no.
just curious.
Yes, it's in Burlington. They are just concerning adding a few more pallet shelters to the existing.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Thank you. And apologies, yes.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Councilmember Burns, but you did hear correctly, there is a Mount Vernon attachment. Mount Vernon has been really good about supporting, as did City of Sedro-Woolley, in supporting the actual structures there and then some of the operating costs. And so the City of Mount Vernon has expressed that they would like to allocate 1406 monies if there was an expansion of number of units there. So the county, and just a tiny bit of background, the county had purchased with the remains of a grant additional, I think there's 13 units that have to be available if there's any kind of an outbreak requiring quarantine. I mean, we hear about measles going around or whatever. Those units have to be pulled for something specific, but they can be deployed and utilized in the meantime. They just are going to be labeled as specific grant-funded units. But the City of Mount Vernon portion of that is they're going to help with the operating costs.
Thank you, Commissioner Janicki, for that. I knew I'd heard Mount Vernon somewhere along the way, and I was just like, did I forget something? So thank you for that.
All right. Councilman Cobb?
Yes, thanks for the great presentation, Monica. And I think North Star is important. We need a countywide approach to this difficult problem. I noted in the background information two really daunting concerns. In 2020, Sedro-Woolley had 318 homeless school-aged children. That's pretty scary. And that Skagit County tied for the lowest vacancy rate in the state at just 0.4%. So there's, with the low vacancy and the level of homelessness, we have sort of focused on being hyper-local in some of the funding we've given, but I do see the value of your program. I had one question, though. At the North Star Center, how will the staff there be funded? Is that like through Medicare, Medicaid, or insurance? How does that work?
Yes, my understanding is that they're going to try to use Medicaid funds for services. And then in addition, there will be a need for at least startup costs that I believe that they're still being worked out, or the county helped with that. I'm sorry, this is where I'm new and I don't know yet all the details, but I know that Medicaid dollars are.
That's correct. So the build-up to being able to be funded through the Medicare reimbursement is the same model that's being used in Spokane, who has the same provider that will probably bid this project when we go for a provider, and the same provider is operating the Whatcom County facility. So that we toured both facilities in design and talking about operations and how that funding part works so that we would be ready for it. And there is about $400,000 in startup funds that we'll have to come up with probably out of other county funds, or that's an unknown, but we want to make sure that we hit the ground running and are ready to operate. So
That's great. It's a fantastic addition to Sedro-Woolley and the entire county. Thank you.
You know, and just because you guys all know my story, you know, when I had a group of commissioners here, we went over to Patrick's playground, read the story of Patrick there, and, you know, and that unfortunate ending to his life story. And so when I could just drive literally, you know, around the block behind there and show them the construction, I mean, that the concrete was being poured the day that these other commissioner groups were there, the big pumper trucks there, and being able to say that we're building a stabilization, treatment, and recovery. That's the STAR. A STAR recovery right here. I mean, I had tough commissioners from Eastern Washington practically in tears, realizing that our small community could do this when it's needed in virtually every community. So I just, for all the support that we get across this county, it really does, it comes to a, you know, from a mother's heart is a really good place to be. So thank you guys all.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Councilman Lavaca.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Monica, for coming by. I am curious, have you heard of Family Promise or Helping Hands? I know that they're partnering with you a little bit, and same thing with the YMCA.
Yes, I have heard, yes.
So they expressed interest in trying to help people that were in our community and about. And as you know, Family Promise helps throughout Skagit, and Helping Hands does too. So we were able to get them over. It took a bit of time, and as Councilman Koch just pointed out, the stats that we've known about for many years since I've been on council, that there was an urgent need, but it took a long time to get them here. And when we got them here, we were able to help them with all the resources that they requested. And the way that we kind of looked at it, or at least I looked at it, was that North Star is helping a lot with the substance issues, STAR program, right? And so they're able to help with the youth in the Y, and help with homeless youth, and help with helping kids not to go down the right path or wrong path, and getting them on the right path sooner. And then also with the young families, or families in general, people with children, there's requirements, no drug use, things like that. And you would expect that same thing with the Y. And then with the Helping Hands, kind of touching base on the seniors. And so Sedro-Woolley represents about 10% of the county, if I'm right, 130,000 people in our county, roughly 13,000 people here. And so we're interested to see how that program works out. And as you guys might look into that program and see, are these guys effective with the resources that they've received? We had an opportunity, I think it was Volunteers of America, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they came here and they were hoping to get $500,000, I think, for to build a 42-unit place that they estimated at $21 million or more. So it's like $500,000 for a single unit. So we're seeing that helping local might get the money into the hands of the people who really need it, and then those guys seem to spend it very well and be up close and personal. Immense success rates with all all sectors. So I think with those four pieces together, veterans are kind of intertwined with the families, with the seniors, and other ways as well. But I think that there's really 5 sectors to the challenge that we're seeing. We've aimed a lot of energy at just one of those sectors. So I'd like that Sedro-Woolley is kind of looking at these other sectors. And I hope that you're keeping an eye on that as well. We actually had somebody that was here and they saw us. We gave $247,000 to these 3 agencies. And he got up and he was kind of upset that we weren't supporting the North Star program, it seemed. And he was saying that we really need to be at that table, which I appreciate that council members are. But I kind of see that he was actually here and saw us fund these 3 agencies that are amazing agencies, and they're actually Sedro-Woolley based, so there's a little bit of pride there, but they're also doing amazing things for people in need as well. So I'd like to draw a little attention to those guys and a little attention to a partnership as far as seeing how all that rounds out.
Thank you so much for calling that out, council member. I think you're absolutely right. Focusing on the substance use piece, it's only just one piece. There's such a big need for youth services, for senior services. The problems are only increasing for those populations. The same with veterans, right? And so absolutely, I think North Star can and should and is focusing on those populations as well. And I think I would also like to acknowledge and call out and thank you again. You can never have, this is Monica's humble belief, you can never have a strong regional approach without a very, very strong local implementation and approach. And so what you're doing in this community, it's very, very important. And again, Monica's humble approach, I don't think that it should be one or the other. I don't think that it should be North Star or regional focused or local Sedro-Woolley focused. I think it should be both together. And so thank you for supporting those systems, whether it's youth or whether it's seniors or veterans. And I think that these are the things that we, as we hear, as you call them out, that we should do more and focus more in North Star as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much, too. I would just note that, there's different specialties, there's different slices of pie. Certain people might excel at one or the other. So North Star, even though is a wonderful organization, if they don't wish to focus on all umbrella over the entire thing and allow these ones to bloom and become successful in their own ways, that's awesome. I'd love to see declining rates in communities like Seattle. North Star's from Seattle, and seeing the homelessness decline in Portland or Seattle or local areas, right? And so that's going to be really a great metric to see where those people are like in the communities growing. So it's almost like trying to put out a fire sometimes, it feels like, with a propane burner lighting everything up. And we're putting out the flames, but we're not turning off the fuel. What's the root cause of a low income or middle class income becoming impoverished or homeless? And when that's a fuel gauge that I don't know if anybody's really tackling.
Right. How can we focus on upstream interventions to stop that?
Absolutely.
Well said. Thank you so much. Definitely. Would love to team up on that.
Well, thank you, Monica. And to Nick's point, actually, we're supporting our community, but we're also supporting the mission of North Star, because a couple of those agencies that we've actually provided funding for, they are part of North Star.
Yes.
So we're reaching here and we're reaching beyond, and that's a beautiful thing to be able to do that and to be able to say that we're contributing to our community. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming tonight. It's like I said, it's only been a couple months since you've been here, but I've had a chance to meet with you a couple different times. Very excited about having you here.
Thank you so much,
I really
Mona.
believe we're going to do some good things together as communities. So thank you, Monica.
Thank you again for having me.
And thank you, Commissioner Janicki, for being here as well. Thank you. Okay. All right, moving on then to the City Administrator report. Go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson, Council, and Chief Wagner is going to join me on this one as well. This is an update on the Fire District 8 conversations that we're having to look at renewing an interlocal agreement with them, where the city responds to calls in Fire District 8. The council has adopted guiding principles related to this contract negotiation, and as of right now, we're getting down to crunch time. We're down to 2 items that we need to resolve in the contract. We've tentatively agreed on the rest of the language. And given that the time is short, I've included a copy of the marked up interlocal agreement in your packet, just so you have a chance to start looking at that. In terms of the timeline here, tonight we could use direction from you on those remaining 2 items. They are potentially different. They are different than your guiding principles, and depending on how we respond, could be significantly different. The District 8 will have a special meeting next week to talk about whatever we send them after this meeting. So I'm going to update this contract in the morning, send it off to them. They'll have a meeting early next week. And then on December 5th, we have our next negotiation session with them where we hope we can come to an agreement. And if we do reach that agreement, then we'll have it in your council packet for December 11th. If we don't reach an agreement, then we may need a special council meeting. So we just put December 19th down there as a possibility. I'm sorry, December 18th as a possibility. So that's a little bit of just an update on the timeline, just where we are with negotiations. With 2 items left, we hope we can get there. And I did want to mention one other thing before we just jump in asking you for direction. And that is that the district mentioned as a fallback. So right now, the terms of where we would provide service and everything else are consistent with what we discussed the last time. But as a fallback, the district is proposing in 08 South, this one area, that we serve, to have us just do nights and weekends. And at the $1,032 cost per call, we estimate that would be about 40% fewer calls and result in about $374,000 coming back to the city. So significantly less than the $567 that we're discussing right now. In the 2025 budget, we have, and so we will want to know before this discussion's over if the council is open to that kind of deal if we end up in that discussion with them, because we can't come to an agreement on the other provisions. The main ones being the amount of money that they're going to pay us for the contract terms that we've been talking about, covering more hours in 08 South than just nights and weekends, and also the CPI. So we'll get into those 2 things in a minute, but I wanted to point out before we jump there that in the budget, we have $567,000 in there for revenue and $568 in 2026. So if we end up with less than that, we will need to look at how to adjust the budget as a result of that in the general fund. So with that background, and the chief, you may want to jump in here with a little bit more, but I'm prepared to jump into the table and to start talking through those options.
I think most of you have probably, we talked about this a few times before, and with Public Safety Committee as well. We've had this contract for, I think, as long as I can remember, the 31 years I've been here. And those that don't know, we cover everything outside of the city of Sedro-Woolley city limits for District 8 in what we call 8 South 1 and 8 South 2 zones, which are GIS zones in our dispatch center and in that software. But that is everything that is west of the city limits to District Line Road. So anybody that lives on Cook Road or Collins Road, down on River Road, as well as east all the way up State Route 20, outside of the city limits, Minkler Road, all the way up to the Minkler Lake corner on State Route 20, Bacchus Hill, Upper Skagit Reservation, north of the city limits up to Mosier Road is all inclusive of, Bassett and Grip Road. And so all those folks all these years have gotten their primary response and services from the city of Sedro-Woolley by contract. And the fortunate or unfortunate part is our budget continues to grow as does theirs. Our call volume continues to grow as does theirs. And with that, we, when I started here 30 years ago, we were running less than, 400 calls a year total. Now we're upwards of 3,600. 700 of our calls the last 3 or 4 years on average have been theirs in that zone. They run about 900 plus calls a year on average, and we do 700 of them right now. And we do those in that 8 South areas without them responding at all, because the unfortunate thing is we relied on each other so much, they don't have the fire stations in those zones. They have 2 up north, one on Prairie Road, one on Highway 9, up past Samish School there. And then they have the 2 far to the east, covering the town of Lyman and the Pumpkin Center area there just west of Hamilton. So as we move forward, that they don't have the infrastructure to deal with the geographic area that we do, and we've kind of met in the middle and helped each other out and done it by contract for all these years. Well, as we grow and they grow, you just passed a levy as the citizens voted on this last cycle where we've been able to hire more people. Our costs are going up, and it's not fair in our mind, and kind of the guiding principle of what we were asked to move forward with this negotiation is to make it fair and equitable between the two, so that we're not subsidizing services for District 8 that they're already being taxed for by their constituents. So we pulled up some numbers for this contract. The assessor's office shows that they're bringing in $1.5 million total for their entire district. For those two zones that we cover 100% of the time for emergency services, they're bringing in $767,000. And in this last contract, they've also tried to minimize some of those calls by taking on the non-emergent stuff, like the burn complaints and the investigation responses and things they can handle with a battalion without utilizing us, which has cut down about 50 to 75 calls a year on average. And they have hired some full-time folks, two individuals to go along with Chief Carpenter to kind of help out during the week. But we kind of need some direction from you folks as far as where you want to go. I know when we started this with the Public Safety Committee, we were looking at total cost recovery of the full $767,000 or more. And we've kind of gone back to taking out of our budget anything that results from our EMS contract that we're already being paid to do by the EMS levy. So we would continue to provide those transport-capable ambulances to anywhere that is called upon by contract, because that's what we are going to do for the EMS levy. This is that first response for the fire engines, the battalions, the extra folks on the CPRs and the larger calls. So we're kind of at a point where they've this last year we were paid $361,000 by them. We had kind of met in the middle at what they thought by doing some of the items that they were going to do to kind of minimize the call volume for us. They could get our calls down to 550 calls from that normal 700 average, and we would meet in the middle at $1,032 a call, which is the average cost for us right now, or expected cost for next year, taking out the EMS dollars and the transport dollars. They came back to the table and presented us with a fixed cost of $450,000 for 2025, and we're kind of looking for direction as what is fair and equitable to the council to move forward with them so that we can come to a consensus with them and finalize. If that
Can I
makes
ask
any
a
sense. Or
quick
if I-
question?
Go
Chief?
ahead, Councilman Cock.
Would the proposed BESS facility be in the fire district area? Because I would imagine that's a significant fire risk.
The proposed BESS facility as far as the energy storage system? that you're-
Yeah.
Yes, that is in that 8 South zone where it's just outside of the city limits and just to the east of us here. So that is one of those areas that the city of Sedro-Woolley provides primary response by contract. Without this contract, they would be providing services to that area from their 2 stations up north outside of town and from the stations to the east. So, yes, sir.
Councilman Lavaca?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, this one's kind of a difficult one because the services are so needed in those areas. And it's not like it's easy just to shut that valve off or even on the aspect of just our people, just the people in general, our firefighters, they're built to help. They're built to love. They're built to run to the fire, not away from it, and to say, okay, well, that's going to be on them, and they're going to have to figure that out. The challenge is I feel or that I see when you talk about a fixed income or fixed rate of $450, with these kind of increased infrastructure projects such as BESS, if it did go through, if we were mandated to do it, if there's other businesses in the area that are growing and developments that are growing, we see our community and traffic has increased greatly, and that's spreading outward of the city limits. That's just going to take a lot more from our tax dollars, and it's going to put a lot more pressure on the resources if we try and go with a fixed rate. So my personal opinion, I wouldn't be into a fixed rate. It is challenging. I would think that if we wanted to just go by call, maybe even, $1,600 a call or something like that, because we wouldn't be able to budget for that. So, okay, well, if it's going to be per call, it'll be this much, and then you can see how much we can handle or not, and then come back to the table in another year or so. But, it is nice to have that agreement. It's nice to have a partnership. And without that infrastructure in place, it's not like you can just buy a fire department and place it into these certain areas. So it's, everybody's hands are a little bit tied. And I think we relied heavily on volunteer firefighters, which kept that cost down heavily. And it'd be awesome if we can go back to that route. And maybe even spruce up how we attract them. Get some bench seating at the fire training center, and really inspire kids and teenagers that want to be firefighters. But that would be my take on it. I would find it hard to go with that one, and I'd almost take the hit of the 567 this year and see what can we do.
And I totally agree with you, Councilman Lavaca, that there's definitely some what ifs in here, and it's hard to budget on that. Like, I think you can attest to, we're growing a lot to the east. So with Janeke bringing in more buildings and more jobs and the traffic and stuff that's going with that, how do we budget on a fixed dollar amount for a call volume that could increase by 10% or 20%? And is it fair and equitable to our taxpayers to foot that increases if they do happen? And one of the things that our initial proposal was that we would have a true up on that 567,000 if their implementation plan that they have going forward takes our call volume down to 400, then we would do a true up and give a refund back to them. Or if it went above the 550, that we would have a true up and they would make it right the other direction, so that it was a more fair and equitable to both entities. And the emotional side that you spoke about, 30 plus years, we've been working together so collaboratively as a team. It's been seamless. And your folks out in the district, I don't think a lot of them still realize that it's two different entities, because when they call 911, we have people that show up and they take care of the business. And then on our side, the folks, it's going to be hard for them if we don't continue this and move forward of having a call and not being able to respond, because, Wicker Road, that's 5 blocks from our station. How are we going to sit here and not go, knowing that they're going to have to bring somebody from Lyman or Pumpkin Center or the Samish station up past Samish School and Prairie up there? So, very valid points.
Last thing, when I looked over the numbers, it is a sticker shock, I think, for everybody, because it went up about, I want to say 35% overnight almost, because of the levy, because of the cost, and because we didn't have firefighters. And so that's a sticker shock to them. I could imagine, like, what, we're now having to pay this. So I can see where the challenges are, but the simple fact is there's money on the table that's going, and whether it's our taxpayers or those taxpayers, how do we get the bill to where people can get help? And I think
Councilman Burns?
For me, looking at the numbers for what they're getting just for the 2 districts we cover in total, and that it exceeds what we are asking for to cover all of the services we provide, I can't in good conscience pay for what's going on outside the city with our constituents' dollars. It doesn't make sense to me to subsidize Fire District 8 when they have the funds to cover the costs for the calls that we are responding to for them. Looking at $1,032 per call, if that is what the city is paying, yeah, it's a lot, but it costs a lot of money to maintain a fire engine, to maintain a crew to actually show up with it. It costs a lot of money to put tires on those, change the oil, pay for medical insurance, vacations. Those are all things that Fire District 8 doesn't have to worry about. They don't have to consider those things in regards to all the staff, and we do. So we're looking at what it cost us And I think giving a very reasonable offer, saying this is exactly what it costs us, and that's all that we're asking for in return. We're not asking for everything for the area that we are covering completely. We're just asking for coverage of our costs to recoup what it is costing our constituents. We're putting the money out in advance and just saying, can you pay us back for that? If we're asking them to put out the $567,000 because that's what it cost us last year to cover their areas, that seems reasonable to me. Them not coming back to the table last year to true up did not sit well with me as far as their ability to negotiate with us on this in good faith. I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about what we do to make sure that we are covering ourselves financially. And I really don't want to see a hole in our budget that we have to fill. But at the same time, they're the ones with a deadline of the first of the year where they have to figure out what they're going to do. And I don't see somebody building a fire station and a fire department in that period of time. I would like us to continue to have that relationship, or for it to be a good relationship. I don't want to sour that with the negotiations, but again, I can't pay for things that are happening outside the city. To me, it's almost like we're gifting funds to Fire District 8 at that point. So that's my biggest concern with it. It's just making sure we're covered here. And I think their offer of $450 upfront is a little too low to cover those costs, but I'm hoping to hear what the chief has to say about that.
I think when you're looking at total full cost recovery, it is low. And I agree that there is some sticker shock there. The downfall or the flip side of that is if this contract does come to an end at the end of this year, that it's going to be hard emotionally for my folks and for most of us who have friends and family that live out in those areas that don't understand what they have or won't have. But you're right on. And how do we bridge the gap to meet in the middle to make it fair and equitable?
All right, thank you. Councilman Loy?
Yes, Chief. Historically, how's things gone? Has Sedro-Woolley tended to come out breaking even or losing a little or gaining a little?
I think as this contract has progressed over the years, we were predominantly, like Councilman Lavaca was saying, we were predominantly volunteers. So you look at, 20 years ago, our budget was probably under $300,000 for the 1,000 or 2,000 calls we were doing because we were relying on these folks that lived in the stations and were residents like myself. And, we got a free room and board to respond to calls. And now as that's progressed and we've had the need to expand and grow and hire full-time folks and staff these things along with the increases in providing the services or everything where we keep talking about, the 1% or the 3% cost CPI that's going up. In emergency services through COVID, we were going up 15, 20, 30%. Our fire engines that we used to buy for $120,000 are now $1.1 million. Everything is increasing on every end. And back then, the city and the district were working so well together that, in the beginning of our contracts where we started providing part-time services, they provided 2 of those people, and they paid half. But the call volume wasn't where it is today. So, we would pay for 2 part-time folks or 2 of those seats, depending on who it was. Then it was probably $10 or $12 an hour, and they would pay for 2. So it was a collaborative 50-50, and that our budget has obviously gone up substantially with taking on the ambulance services and that EMS levy contract, and now with the new levy lid lift for fire side, we've again since almost doubled our contract or our budget again with staffing.
Other than Sedro-Woolley, what options does Fire District 8 have?
They don't have anybody else around their geographic areas that have the resources and infrastructure that we do. So it would be limited.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Councilwoman Diamond.
Which district is the Upper Skagit Reservation actually serviced through?
The Upper Skagit Reservation is actually surrounded by Fire District 8, so we are providing those services for them.
And they're contracted with the reservation, correct?
It is my understanding that the Upper Skagit Reservation has a contract for services with Fire District 8.
Okay, but the city of Sedro-Woolley is covering those calls?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that included in the budget, included in this, or in the call volume in this information?
Yes, that's a part of those 700 calls is with any responses up at Upper Skagit Reservation.
Okay. I have a tendency here I'm leaning in the same direction as Councilmember Lavodka in the sense that I do think it's our friends and our family and our community that live in the county. However, it is the city's tax-paying dollars and resources and the people that live within the city that we need to be conscious of in regards to that. And so there is that cat and mouse game being played right now with District 8 in regards to how they're funded and how the county tax-paying dollars are actually being used for those specific resources. Because the city of Sedro-Woolley, based on all of these numbers, assuming they are in fact all correct, is subsidizing District 8 and running a very significant percentage of call volume for them. And so I don't think that there should be any issue with a true-up at the end of the year. I think that that's more than fair. If District 8 ends up running the majority of their calls and taking on a lot more, as they say that they're capable of doing, then the true-up would set them right at the end of the calendar year, based on call volume specifically. And if it wasn't, then, the table would turn and everybody would flush out at the end of the year and you'd move forward with the next until the end of the next contract negotiation. And I think that that seems only fair with the CPI increases that could be expected, and with the call volume that could change. I mean, it could be in there. It wouldn't hurt them in this sense to do a true-up at the end of the year, because if they in fact do increase the call responses, then they would be able to receive that money would come back to them at the end of the year. However, if they do not, the surrounding community still deserves to be served at some point, because you're very right in the sense that I was talking to several people throughout the county and in the area, and most people do not understand where those district lines are. They don't. They call 911 and somebody shows up. And the majority of the time, it's the city of Sedro-Woolley. And where some of these places are actually located, if you were to call 911 and you're technically located in District 8, it could be 30 minutes to get there, when somebody could be responding from Station 2 and be there in 7. That's a hard line to toe when you're talking about somebody's livelihood or their life at the end of the day. And it could be a matter, you're talking about a 20-minute, 25-minute response time and trying to calculate it and basing those response times on a dollar value. We can't in good conscience, as a city, go backwards. We can't knowingly do something that is going to put us in the negative from a financial standpoint. But we do have to do what we can to try to serve the community and put egos aside from all parties and look at what is best for the taxpayers and what is best for our community, for our family, for our friends that live in all of these surrounding areas. And in doing that, in reviewing all of the different numbers and kind of trying to think through different options and listening to the pager over the weekend, specifically, it's on all the time at my house, and calculating the response time from the first call out and when District 8 may actually respond, and listening for second tones because nobody has responded. And at that point, the city of Sedro-Woolley would then be, the city of Sedro-Woolley is waiting for that response, waiting to be toned out for that because District 8 has not yet responded. Yet somebody's calling at a dire point in their life or
you know, a terrible time of that day because something emergent has happened and they need help. So I have a hard time with saying that the city would not or could not respond, because these are all people that we know and care about. But we have to come to some sort of reasonable agreement, and I think the true up at the end of the year seems incredibly reasonable.
Okay, Councilman Henderson.
Yeah, thank you. What the numbers that we had gone over during our committee meeting, at our ask of $567,000 isn't going to leave them bankrupt, right? They're somewhere north of $1.5 million, I think it was. And the way I see it is all those people are paying their taxes just like we are, and they're expecting services to be had just like we are. But it kind of feels like District 8 is saying, nah, we don't really want to pay out all that money. We want to keep a little bit for ourselves and not cover what these people are already paying for to keep themselves safe. So me personally, I would keep chipping away at that $567,000. I'd like it to be call-based. I'd love it to be call-based, but, you know, because if we're not going on calls, then it's not costing us. But from the numbers that you showed us, this is more than affordable, and I think you guys are doing a good job. You know, they're trying to negotiate, but, you know, you guys know how to negotiate too, so, you know, I trust your decision, but I'd like you to make sure that you're not going in the red.
Councilman Koch?
Yeah, I just would like to agree with what all of my other fellow council members said. I think I'd stick with the 567. You know, that is a growing area, and I can't imagine, especially with increased traffic from, like you said, up east, I can't imagine that your call volume will go down. Also, you know, they're getting highly professional service from y'all, and I think that's something to keep in mind too. You know, that's the service they're providing their constituents that you really can't put a price on, because it's keeping people alive. Thank you.
Okay. So I think you've heard from everyone. I don't know if that's giving you any direction at all. It sounds like to me they'd like you to keep chipping away at it, but not to deny any services, that is still something that, as I hear it, something that the council still wants to see happen.
Madam Mayor, I think it may be hard to do both. I think if they don't do it, then there's really, like, the contract ends, and then it's hard to provide services without a contract. So, like, do you have the information you need?
I think we're really close. There were a couple other elements to this, but to play off of that last comment by Councilmember Lavaca, that nights and weekends discussion that they opened up with us a little bit at the end of the last conversation is likely, if the 567 is just something that they can't do for whatever reason, likely going to be what they come back with and say, you know, how about nights and weekends in 08 South? And we estimate that's like a 40% drop in the call volume that we would respond to. And based on this conversation with council, we would still make it volume-based. We'd still make it the $1,032 per call. Based on council conversation tonight, I think that you're all probably open to that, but I don't want to assume that. So it'd be good to verify if they come back with that, if that kind of approach would be acceptable to the council.
If I may ask.
Councilman Diamond?
Oh, I was just going to ask, so the other night when we had the big windstorms, and there were a lot of calls out into District 8, if this contract was not to go through, you've got power lines over the roadway, you've got fires started by power lines, you've got windstorms, you've got 911 calls for various other issues. With only 3 people on their department, is the city of Sedro-Woolley's hands tied then in the ability to help if they did even have the capability and resources?
To answer that question, I mean, they have 3 full-time folks now, and I think there are over 30-plus volunteers. But when they have a major incidents like that, we are all part of an interlocal agreement called the mutual aid.
Okay.
So after their department gets toned out, and normally I think they get toned out and it's like a 5 to 6 minute delay for a response for someone to show up. And then if they don't show up within that time, they get a second tone. And after that second tone, it would go to a mutual aid, which goes to the next geographical district or city. They would be requested to respond next. And a mutual aid agreement is if that individual agency has the resources or staffing available, then they would send somebody. If they don't, then it goes to the next one. So to answer your question, after a time delay, someone is going to respond, and that may be us. It just, right now by contract, they are kind of like our family. They are
Right.
part of us, as going back to the whole deal of not knowing whose actual responsibility is, because we kind of operate as one and have for so many years. We wouldn't be the first to be toned out for those areas. So like somebody on Wicker Road or down here on River Road, they would have to go through a significant amount of time for multiple tone outs before we would get notified or requested.
Okay. And that mutual aid is that completely separate from this contract during that
Yes.
time? Okay, I just wanted to
This
clarify.
contract is so that they have a provision of services immediately on first tone. We respond for them, and in that District 8 South 1 and 2 areas, we respond in place of them. They don't even get toned out for those calls.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification.
Except for ambulance services. We're still
Still.
going to be first up for ambulance services for everywhere.
Okay, thank you.
So Chief, do you have what you think you need, or do you want to hear more clarification from the council?
I have one more question, if I may, Madam Mayor. If we have staffing that's adjusted for 700 and then we cut that staffing back to roughly 400 or 350 or less, and then they do need it, would we be staffed accordingly?
As far as if we don't take on their contract,
Yeah, I mean, would we keep the same staff? I'm not saying let people go, but if you have 10 people on a shift anticipating so many calls through past trend or legacy data, and now you know that's not going to be there, why would we keep people on shift that we know aren't going to be?
I think by contract right now, we have the 4 individuals, the 2 that are supported by that EMS levy, and the 2 that we just added for this fire levy. Above and beyond that, we have the volunteers and the residents that staff the other 4 positions that we try to staff every day. And right now, that's kind of hit or miss whether we always have them on. So we would not go backwards in service. It would just change our deployment strategy. And for those secondary and tertiary calls, we wouldn't have that bench strength to move up and do more.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Burns.
To be honest, that is one of my biggest concerns with this contract not fulfilling our cost coverage. In addition, is that if they don't agree to it now and we start adjusting accordingly, then we don't have that bounce back ability to actually have a full coverage for them when they go, oh, we actually can't cover this after all. Because I don't want people out here to suffer outside of the city, but at the same time, these are their commissioners making the choice to not cover costs.
Any comments regarding that, Chief?
I think you're right on there, and I just wanted to add that with this, there's also been some discussion of, after we get done with this contract, to continue working on a relationship of, what does it look like to kind of work more together in the future, whether that be a fire authority or regionalization, and they've been willing or at least willing to come together and bring somebody in and start researching that as an option as well. So those are relationships that we want to continue to cultivate and look at working together for the long term as well. So.
One last piece of this, which is the CPI adjustment. So in a volume-based contract, the CPI would apply to the cost per call. So the 1,032, say inflation's 5%, you'd apply 5% to that, and then that would calculate the new amount that would be due the following year. They have requested brackets on that. They have not requested specific numbers. But what that would mean is essentially whatever the CPIU is, it would not be allowed to go above a certain number. Let's just say the bracket was 6%. If it came in at 8%, they would get charged 6%. That's how much we would inflate the cost per call. And it wouldn't be able to go below a certain number. We do this on our labor contracts. So, if inflation was 0, it would still be a 1% increase. I wanted to check with council to see, or we did, if you have any heartburn or concerns over brackets, if you want to just leave it open, how you'd like to proceed. I will say if we had brackets, and we just put in here to get the conversation started 1 to 6%. If we had these in the last contract, when we were up at 9 or 10% inflation, we would have only been able to charge 6%, just as an illustration. Hopefully we will not see that kind of inflation again anytime soon.
Any thoughts? Councilman Henderson?
Thank you. The high range on the bracket set at 6, it can kind of be wishy-washy, I mean, if we could limiting it at 6, and I think it was 2021, we had 10% inflation, or was that 22?
It was somewhere in there.
Yeah. One of the bad years. And if we set our bracket at 6 for a max, I mean, would it, I know you have a lot more experience negotiating contracts than I do, but could we just say that we'll go ahead and go, 0.5% below max every time, right? So like, say inflation's 11%, so we come in at 10.5, so we're giving them some savings, and it's not completely a variable rate, but then if inflation's 6%, then we get 5.5, and that seems relatively equitable. I mean, I'd hate to see inflation spike and us only be able to charge 6.
That is an option. That's something we could look at. It'd be helpful to have a motion from the council if you want to change our approach. Our approach right now is somewhat general. You could probably apply brackets within the way that council's guiding principle is stated, but we didn't want to just assume that. So that approach is a viable alternative.
Go ahead, Councilman Burns.
If a 6% cap got them to the table on the numbers that you're actually presenting, the 500 and, sorry, I don't have it directly in front of me. Thank you, 567,000, and then the 1,032 per call. If that 6% cap got them there, I could accept that.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll go along with that. If it gets us them paying what we're asking, I'm fine with 6.
Okay, yeah, it shows some goodwill. I mean, oftentimes with these things, you kind of catch up at the next contract if
Councilman Koch?
you're
Yeah,
over the
I'm just going to say I agree with that sentiment. I think it makes sense.
Okay. All right. Do the others agree?
I'm good with the bracket.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll come back at the 1 to 6.
Sounds like you got your
We'll keep
marching
it-
orders?
Yeah, we'll keep it volume-based. We'll keep it at 1,032 per call, which is going to result in the 567. So I'll counter that with them tomorrow, and then we'll keep you posted.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is council and mayor reports. So I'll start with you, Councilman Loy.
I want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. And our annual Thanksgiving is to go to Woodland Park Zoo for Thanksgiving. It's quite a good thing for the kids, but happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Very nice. Councilwoman Kesty?
I will echo that, and happy Thanksgiving to everyone, and invite and remind everyone that on Saturday, it's Shop Small Saturday, and there's going to be a sip and stroll. I don't know if many of you have seen, but the downtown businesses have decorated their storefronts, and there's going to be a competition. So if you come to the museum at 4 o'clock, you can get a ballot and vote on who you think did it best, as well as listen to a jazz band concert. So I invite you to come do that, and happy holidays.
Councilwoman Diamond?
Nothing this evening. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right, thank you. Councilman Henderson?
I don't have anything for this evening, but I would ask to be excused for our December 4th workshop. I'll be traveling outside of the country.
Okay. Councilman Cock?
Yes, this is for our wonderful chief, police chief. Chief, I saw on the paper that Anacortes had instituted an emergency alert system. I found that interesting because I helped develop the one at the university in Bellingham. And are we part of an emergency alert system? Because I know that Skagit 911 has a code red emergency notification system. And I just wondered if any of the schools in town do, because up in Bellingham, it's the city of Bellingham has one, the university has one, and the school district has one.
Yeah, we're part of Code Red with Skagit 911, and then our school district actually has Easy Alert, so
Good.
We get notified of alerts at school, such as fire drills, any emergency that goes on there, police activity in the area, that kind of thing.
Do you train with the school district on active shooter?
Not recently, but yes, we do.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Councilman Burns?
Want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, safe travels if you're heading somewhere. Have a good trip, Councilman Henderson. And also want to remind everybody December 7th is the Christmas parade, and the Sedro-Woolley Lions Club will be doing a Christmas tree sale there. Won't have a lot of trees. It's a pilot program, so come down and have a look and pick one up. Thank you.
Councilman Lavaca?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I did want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, but also throw a reminder out there that not everybody has family, not everybody's in a good place. A lot of people are, but we should keep those people in our mind and our prayers, and look for those signs. You know, in our community, look for people who might be going through a challenging time, or loneliness is setting in. So we shouldn't forget about those parts of our community as well. There's also a school play taking place at the high school, which is pretty cool, coming up, Young Sherlock. That's going to be on the 3rd, and so that should be pretty cool. I'd encourage anybody to go see it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. No report tonight. I just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. Safe travels for those who are traveling. Moving on now to public comments. I'm going to open this at 7:16. Is there anybody within the chamber who would like to make public comment? You're not going to do it tonight, okay. So there was nobody who signed up for it? Anybody online who may wish to make public comment? All right, seeing none, I am going to close public comment. We're going to move right into unfinished business. First item on the list is the 2025 solid waste utility rates. This is ordinance 208624. This is the second read, and we have Eric stepping in for Bill this evening. Good evening, Eric.
Mayor Johnson, thank you. Good to be here tonight. So, Woody, can you bring up that graphic that we shared earlier? So at the last council meeting, there was a fair amount of discussion about the 3 ordinances for adjusting the city's utilities related to CPI. Has been same idea about the fire contract. And during that conversation, the stormwater and sewer charges were passed at 3.1%, adjusting this year, but then continuing in years future to be keyed to that CPI index. The request of the council, as I understood that, was to come back to the council with some information about solid waste and what the effects of pulling funds from the reserve funds would be to the fund within the 2025 cycle. And in listening to that and in conversations with the senior management team and the mayor, staff is recommending that we make the solid waste rate adjustments to be the same as sewer and for stormwater, and to pull funds from those reserve funds. And so this graphic that's shown on the screen here shows the effect of drawing down those reserve funds to the full amount. So we're starting at a 10%, which is where we started with the committee. And as staff, we'd like to keep those reserves very healthy. But seeing that the impact to ratepayers and the effects to the community, are recommending that we do go down to that lower 3.1% for 2025 only, with the assumption that that be indexed as it would be in the ordinance for 26, 27, 28 years in the future, again tied to CPI. And what that effectively does is it draws down about $200,000 from the reserve funds at the 3%, which would leave us about $616,000 in the reserve fund. The blue bar on the screen there is the target, so that's higher than the minimum. So the minimum is one, if I can keep these numbers right. It's it's 1/12 of the revenue. I think I've got those numbers wrong, but there's
No,
a minimum
that's
and a target. We have, at the target is about 425,000. We can meet that target, which is higher than the minimum. So if we consider that drawdown of the reserves for a single year in 2025, assuming that in future years we're continuing to adjust by CPI, what that means is that drawdown is a one-time expense. And we typically do not like to use reserves for ongoing expenses, but if those fees are indexed into the future, that would not be an ongoing expense. It would just be a one-time drawdown, which would be beneficial to our consumers, our ratepayers, and to the city by providing all the benefits we talked about before, with minimizing that impact to our ratepayer customers. So the ordinance that you have before you tonight was revised, and it removed the language that had for the one-time increase in the CPI to account for the tipping fees, but just mirrors the other language we have for solid waste and, for sewer and for stormwater, indexing those utility rates into the future at CPI, Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, as we've been using for other contracts, and is also used in other elements of the code as well. So happy to answer any questions. I hope this graphic addresses the council member Henderson's concern that was raised before. Rec staff recommendation is to approve the ordinance as presented.
Right. I think it's really great that you listened to the council and you came back with something that really is something will work for everybody. So any questions? Go ahead, Councilman Koch.
Yeah, I just thank you for your good work on this, and it makes sense. If we look in the prior years, we were falling behind, and based on that kind of practice, in future years, if we kept doing that, we'd be hit with some big increases, which I just think is not good planning, especially since we're going to be needing an upgraded sewage treatment plant. And I also want to say, the council did a good job, I think, of holding firm on the 1% property tax, but this one's kind of out of our hands in terms of some of these increases. We're getting stuck with the tipping fees and things like that. So I think this is a good approach, and I support it. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Henderson?
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you doing this. So which of those options are we going with? Are we going with the 10%?
The 3%. So if you had passed the ordinance as written, it adopts CPI, which for 2024 is 3.1%. So we'll come at the very far on my right, that 3% bar, which shows 616,000 approximately. I mean, these are engineers, not finance directors, coming up with these numbers, but that leaves a very healthy balance compared to the target in that reserve fund. So that'd be, in terms of the options, we started at 10%. The last recommendation was around 8%. We're now saying go to the far right, which would be that, far right on the graphic being that 3%.
I appreciate you guys being able to absorb that hard hit that would have impacted us and all the ratepayers. So that's good. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Yes, go. Councilwoman Kesty?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to say thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Koch?
Yeah, I also wanted to appreciate the fact that there's still in 2025 rates the 80% of standard rates for low-income folks. That's very important, though. Unfortunately, it'll also go up by the CPI, their rate too. So they'll be hard hit, but not as hard as they could have been. Thank you.
Councilman Lavaca?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Eric, for coming in, too. I really appreciate that. There was a time that we had a good discussion with Leo about reducing the cost by maybe doing larger cans and collecting every other week, or trying to figure out what we can do with how recycling goes. Has there been any movement on any of that? Did Leo ever come up with anything? He said he was working on a plan, and then we never heard back.
Well, I'm on a similar perspective for that. So if we look at the total expenses to the solid waste utility, the tipping fees are a very small percentage of that. About 20% is our cost to pay to move that solid waste someplace else. The vast majority of our expenses in solid waste are the way that we choose to operate the services we provide. So I think there is an opportunity for us to look at frequency of collection, size of cans, type of services that we offer, which is that larger portion of our expenses, to reduce that down. That would be reduce our expenses and then control cost for consumers. We can expect in the future our costs will always come up. So how do we help consumers manage their expenses by changing the types of services we're offering to them. So whether that's reducing the number of cans, or we're proposing to do that, to drop the 20-gallon can and go to a 32. There may be a possibility to go to a standard can that's a larger size that allows consumers to choose an every other week or a once-a-month type service. But we just did not have time to do that this fall. Bill and I have talked about that, and probably a 2025 or 2026 look at holistically how we're providing all services for solid waste. That would give us a chance to do that cost of service model for a consumer, but we did not have time to do that this fall.
Thomas, I'm wondering if there's in that climate funding that was given for consulting in the comprehensive plan, part of that would be reducing fuel on travel, right? You're taking these trucks, you're driving them around the city way more than you need to. People are emptying partially empty cans. Couldn't they use part of that money to throw their way and see if they can't get a consultation, a little bit of a data analysis statement?
We'd have to look at the terms of the grant and see if that would be an appropriate use of those funds, and we could talk about that internally.
Yeah, because I believe that the ultimate outcome right now is saying, hey, reduce the cars on the road, get more electric cars. Well, that seems like that would go right along there. You're not going to get an electric dump truck, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Well, not this year, but Waste Management in Republic, they are heavily invested in garbage trucks, because it's a very good use for that. They get used for 3 or 4 hours in the morning, and they sit idle for the rest of the day. So they're coming, but it'll be probably 10 years
couple
before
years,
they
yeah.
get to that point, but they won't be cheap.
No. Well, battery technologies, who knows? But yeah, maybe if that's something you can, it might tie some ropes.
Okay. If there are no other comments, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councilman Cox, seconded by Councilman Henderson, to adopt ordinance 2086-24 related to the fees and charges for solid waste. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, Eric, for coming in. Moving on now to the 2025-2026 biennium budget, ordinance number 208224. This is the third read. And Kelly, this is you.
Good evening, Council. So the 2025-2026 biennial budget is balanced as presented in the ordinance. The city has held 3 public hearings outlined there and had multiple discussions with council. Our last discussion was on November 13th. The council didn't take any action at that point, and now we're bringing this item back to the council.
Councilman Burns?
Madam Mayor, I think we've had this before us for about 2 months now, and we haven't made any large substantive changes to it thus far. Looking at what's here, it seems reasonable to me to continue to operate the city in a responsible way. And I think that making any big changes this late in the game would probably not be something we could do responsibly. I would like to go ahead and make a motion to pass the 2025-2026 biennial budget ordinance 2028-24 as is.
Thank you.
Madam
Do I have a
Mayor.
second?
I have a question.
I've just a moment here. Do I have a second?
I'll second with a comment. I particularly like the fact that it addresses one of my concerns, which has to do with the reserves in various funds. I think you need to maintain healthy reserves because we don't know what might happen. Thank you.
Councilman LaValca?
Thank you. So I haven't, like Councilman Burns says, seen any real significant decrease that we were hoping to see. It kind of looks like we're hoping to take in about 14.5. We're going to spend 14.2. So we might have $300,000 left over, something like that. That's the hope, right? So or that's in general. And so you can expand out to the full budget too. We're not really doing a huge amount of pulling back. There wasn't any, we had a lot of discussion, one-on-ones. Bill, I talked to him about, do we need Cecil for every member? I can't in good conscience vote for this and not see any of my grievances addressed. So I don't know. I'm sure you guys are working hard at it, but yeah, that's just how I feel. I thought we were going to see a reduction and have a follow through oh, this is the stuff that's been taken out.
Councilman Burns?
Sorry, let me clarify what I was saying. I meant that the city staff has already made their cuts when they brought it to us. They made the adjustments to try to make it so it's a balanced budget. From the council, I haven't heard any further motions in the last meeting to make adjustments to it. And they wanted to wait so that we could all vote on it together, was what they were saying in the last meeting. So I was honoring that by waiting until this meeting so that we could try to pass it and let the city staff plan for next year.
And I appreciate that, Burns. It was just that, like you said, like not much has changed. So that's why maybe you meant it in a different way, but that's the way that I'm stating it now. So thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we have a motion on the table by Councilman Burns, seconded by Councilman Cock to approve ordinance number 208224 for the 2025-2026 biennium budget. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
Okay. One opposition, and that is Councilman Lavaca. All right. Thank you, everyone. We have a budget balanced and approved. Moving on now to new business. This is the Chapter 2.9 and Title 17 of the Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code, Murals and Signs, Ordinance number 209124. This is the first read. And Ash, how you doing, Ash?
I'm good. How are you, Madam Mayor?
I am well, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, council members, for letting me speak tonight. I just wanted to spend 5 minutes or so just going over the background research I did for this, a brief overview of all the changes, and then we can get into some discussion possibly about the specifics of the code, if you have any comments other than outside of the code, anything like that. So I spent pretty much right when I first started in May, a couple of months there, doing some research with other jurisdictions, taking a look at their murals and signs codes, figuring out what they, what our neighbors liked and what our neighbors didn't like. I also did a lot of research on the Municipal Research and Services Center, which is a nonprofit website that provides a lot of guidance for municipal, for planners, for anybody working in municipalities. And then we also held several meetings with our city attorney just to go over the legal basis behind all of this and to make sure that we were compliant with everything. The bulk of the murals code that we have now was written in 1989. 2 public hearings were held then, and I believe that the changes that I'm proposing tonight are going to address the changes that were brought up in 1989. Part of the reason these changes are coming to you tonight is in 2015, as well as before 2015, Supreme Court passed several, held several precedents through case law establishing the difference between content-neutral regulations and content-based regulations. So content-neutral regulations focus on physical and design attributes. So we're looking at location, size of sign, the type of structure, whether it's freestanding or a monument sign, materials, number of signs, things of those natures. Whereas content-based regulations look at the content of the sign, so the text that is being displayed, or any images that may be displayed as well on those signs. And so the key difference between content-neutral and content-based regulations is that content-neutral regulations need to survive intermediate scrutiny, which is going to be that lower level of judicial scrutiny compared to content-based regulations, which need to undergo strict scrutiny, which concerns compelling government interests. So those are going to be things like public safety, constitutional protections, including the First Amendment, things of that nature. So content-based regulations include requiring imagery depict photographs taken between 1890 and 1930 for murals in the city. So given these regulations, I wanted to go over a couple of the chapters that we will be amending. First chapter is going to be 290, our consolidated planning procedures. The changes in that chapter are pretty minimal. It's going to just discuss who has the authority. It's going to be an administrative decision, so Director of Community Development will have the final say on a mural permit. And it also discusses the process as well as any submittal requirements. So those are going to be a rendering of the mural, a portfolio of the artist doing the mural, and a completed application, which I believe is attachment 5 in your packet. Chapter 17.40 regulates signs. This one is also going to, there's not going to be many changes in 1740. We're just adding some more content neutral language, specifically for signs on dead-end streets. making sure that we're focusing on location, size of sign, and staying away from regulating the content that can be placed on signs on dead-end streets. As well as one change that I think you guys, that I think the council will want to pay attention to, which is permitting digital signs on Metcalf Street within the central business district, provided that it complies with the standards and guidelines that were set out by City Council and revised in 2022. That is going to be one of the changes that doesn't necessarily have to do with content-based versus content-neutral regulations. Lastly, Chapter 17.51, that's going to be where the bulk of our changes are going to be, regulates murals. So 1751, at the advice of our city attorney, will be repealed in its entirety and relocated to the signs chapter as a section. That the changes that will be incorporated when that is moved over, pending council approval, will be the bulk of that will be removing the content-based standards that we have in the history subsection as well as the standards subsection, updating our application requirements to indicate the updates in Chapter 290 and to reflect our new permit application form, which is also attached to your packets, as well as adding a couple of additional standards that planning staff felt would be necessary when reviewing mural permit applications. So those are going to be the size of the mural, the size of the building facade the mural will be affixed to, and the structural composition of the structure. So are we painting the mural on brick? Is it going to be, standard vinyl siding? Is it going to be wood siding? What are we looking at here? With that, I wanted to open it up to council to get their initial opinions, and then we can go into the specifics for the code update.
Okay, any questions from council? Councilman Burns?
My understanding from reading this, a lot of the substantive changes that we're making are due to court rulings to bring us into legal compliance. Is that correct?
That would be correct. That would be the bulk of these changes.
Okay, so just protecting freedom of speech essentially is what a lot of these cases seem to boil down to when I was reading the case law that was behind them. Is that your understanding?
Correct. That's my understanding as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Cassidy?
I appreciate all the time that you guys put into it, especially with the historical aspect of it. I just had a couple of questions. So my main concern is that I don't want to see, how do I word this nicely? Political or like social justice type stuff on our historical downtown. This isn't going to turn into that, right? Where we're just opening it up and they could just put whatever they want on the building. How is that going to be kind of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do have a standard in the mural that, in the proposed murals code, that will protect historic sites or structures, and so that would only require local designation. It could be city council that decides to designate what a historical site is, or regional, state, or national. However, that really primarily has to do with the color choice of the murals. When we start talking about the text that will be displayed on the murals, we want to be really careful about what we regulate for that, and we want to make sure that what we say, what we prohibit, substantially advances a compelling state interest as it's perceived when we look at strict scrutiny.
So then, in a way, the way that we had it was very specific to deter that sort of when you go to Snohomish and you see their beautiful murals and you see the signage, kind of like the Sedro-Woolley Museum has done and that the Woolly Market did with their, name and stuff on the side of it. It looks very classic. Are we not allowed then to kind of think as a city, how are we going to move forward and really think about the look that we're trying to give off as people are coming in? So by that old standards, although I'm very much want to see it past those 1930 pictures and things like that, but that saved us a bit. Could we have some sort of view that we're wanting for our town, or is that not allowed anymore?
I would have to get some guidance from the city's legal from
Because this
council
is
for
very
that?
generic, and so
Yes.
the other kind of kept it, like, this is the look that we're going for. We want the carvings, we want the paintings to be old-fashioned. If we don't have a specific of where the community and what we kind of want us, where we're going, I kind of think that saved us. So I'd like to hear back from that.
Certainly, yeah. That's something we can definitely talk with our city attorney about.
Is Nikki on the line?
Yes, I am.
Oh, Nikki, would you be able to address that, answer Councilwoman Kesty's question?
So as Ashton said, what we have been trying to address is the fact that cases came down from the Supreme Court that started with Reed versus Gilbert that essentially said that you can't regulate by content, right? So if you look at a regulation, or if you look at a sign or a mural or the like, and you have to look at the content in order to determine how it's regulated, then it's a content-based regulation. So in your mural code, it talks specifically about the content that you want to see on your murals. And so technically, that's probably a bit problematic under the Reed versus Gilbert case and the ones that came after it, which is a part of why we tried to make the mural code a bit more content neutral as opposed to content based.
Madam Mayor?
So just as a clarification, I think something that I heard Councilwoman Kesty ask is that did the mural that we currently have in place, does that protect us? Is that what you were saying, asking?
Right, like the one that we struck, you know, that kind of protected us from that. Now we're erasing that, and now it's free game, essentially.
My
So
concern.
I think,
Go ahead, Nikki.
I'm sorry. So I think the issue is that we are concerned that it does not comply with Reed versus Gilbert. Those restrictions on the content that protected you, we are concerned that that does not actually follow the case law, because it is a content-based regulation. It is saying this is the content that we want to see in these murals.
Okay. Councilman Cock?
Yeah, I'm pretty familiar with this whole topic of content, and it's a minefield of litigation if you wander too far into regulating content. But is there some way that, you know, our planning staff could look at something, maybe the plans for the mural, and say, yeah, that fits the look we were looking for, not so much getting into content. I'm just saying, I understand what you're saying. I mean, on the other side, we don't want a mural with a big swastika on it, right? So we don't want, I mean, we want our city to be inviting to everybody. So maybe going toward the historical, I don't know, I'm just throwing out ideas, because I know that content, if you tiptoe into it, it's a litigation minefield, because I have listened to many attorneys talk about it at Western, so.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Lavaca?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I kind of feel like if we do go this route, we will open up that Pandora box. I mean, that's exactly what we would be doing. We would not be able to limit it. There, maybe not this council, maybe not this executive branch, but eventually it would come. My question is, are we under a lawsuit right now? Is somebody threatening to sue us over our murals? I mean, which it doesn't seem like anything's driving this change besides, hey, there's this law out there. Let's see if we can't get in accordance. I mean, it seems like we can get away with this for many more years before they're like, we asked for clarification. Does it relate to us?
So there's no litigation currently, to my understanding, but right now, planning staff can't issue any mural permits. We can't review mural permits because we are concerned our code is unenforceable as it's currently written.
Nikki, can I ask you a question real quick? So our code is stating that vans can't park in our communities, right? Like you can't do like RVs and van life type stuff, right?
Correct. You can't park for longer than a certain number of hours.
Yeah, and so what we do is we deter them over to campsites. And if the police come up, they say, hey, you can go to this campsite. But the city owns those campsites. So it's almost extortion in that way. And that was brought out by a camper who was in the food pavilion parking lot, and he was stopped. And so it actually got like 150,000 views real quick, and finally up to, I think it's over 1 million. Yeah, and it was ruled by the Seventh Circuit that what we did was absolutely illegal. And it said that the council authorized a municipal code change that did that. So it basically said what we were doing, that the council did something that shouldn't have been done. I'm just stating that it's not unheard of that you'll find yourself in these areas. I'm not saying that, hey, we should, you know, if the Supreme Court laid down absolute law, but if they're like, hey, this is kind of where we're leaning, and then we're coming back saying, hey, we don't want to do this because could be in legal jeopardy, aren't we already? Did we change that code after that came out or anything? You see what I'm saying? Like, it seems like there's a little bit of a double standard or something.
I'm not sure that there's a double standard, so much as this wasn't a priority. It is my understanding that there has been interest in refreshing the murals or creating new mural designs. And so that's what triggered the conversation, to my knowledge, about amending the code, because now it is something that there is interest in doing. So it's not that there's a double standard so much as it wasn't something that was on the forefront of anyone's attention.
Yeah, thank you very much.
I mean, to your point, it certainly has, it certainly probably hasn't been compliant with Reed for the entire time that Reed's been out.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's necessary to change it. That's my point. I mean, if it's something that becomes a massive, you know, Supreme Court lawsuit against Sedro-Woolley, which I doubt is going to happen with our muralists, you know, I would say just leave it and see what happens.
Yeah, and Nikki's actually absolutely right. The reason that this did come to the forefront was because there are those who would like to do murals that have color to them. They didn't want to have to stay with the brown tones. They wanted something a little bit different and something that would still speak to Sedro-Woolley's character or history, but not necessarily always the logging. So that was the idea behind it, was expanding the, and I know Councilwoman Kesty you were pretty excited about it when we first mentioned it.
What I'm excited about is a future in which we're going to clean up the murals that are there and the possibilities of what we could become. But I don't want to throw it so open that it becomes this hideous mess of someone wants this, they get this, someone wants this, and we're now locked into a...
But it sounds like we weren't under the law anyway, and given the RCWs and regulations that have come into place, we would have to abide by them, would we not, Nikki? Should somebody come in and want to do a mural?
So I think I would rather not weigh in on that in
Okay.
an open session. I would rather draft an attorney-client privileged communication on that.
Okay.
But I do think that there is some concern that this code might fail under the Reed versus Gilbert cases.
Nikki, if you write that up, would you be able to include cities like Paulsbo, Leavenworth, other cities that have adopted like Snohomish, a standard, like nobody's going to paint a random, you know, big, huge, bright thing in Leavenworth because they have a city code. So
No.
I don't know. I'm just curious how they get away with it. Maybe include that. And it, you know, Paulsbo is another good one. Port Townsend.
Went through it.
Yeah, and Leavenworth is one that I have certainly thought about before, but Leavenworth has an adopted theme, right? That is for, that is an economic development driver, right? And it has certainly faced its share of litigation over their design standards, right? This is not exactly the same because Sedro doesn't exactly have a theme or a design theme that it has adopted that it utilizes as an economic driver. But you know, it's certainly something to think about.
I would say since our mural code has been in code for so long that states that 19 to 1930 standard, that is our theme.
It is.
I mean, that's kind of how I see it. I mean, that's how I.
I had a question.
Councilman Henderson has, actually, he's had his light on.
Thank you. Charlie, where are we at on that grant that we did with the, it was, EDASC?
It was Skagit County Economic Development Funds. We were not successful in that grant application.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Cock?
Either of you, couldn't you use a broad topic like historical murals? Because that's what we've always had, and that's sort of seems like it's, that's been our history of, excuse the pun. Wouldn't that sort of cover us to some extent? It should have something to do with the history of Sedro-Woolley, which includes logging and.
For me,
So-
as the planner that would be reviewing that, I would find it difficult to define what is historic and what is not. Because if we have a mural proposed of an image taken in 1931, to me, that seems like that would be historic. But as the code is written now, that would be prohibited.
I think we need more input from Nikki.
Okay, so this is the first read. Does anybody want to ask for some more direction or questions or?
Isn't Nikki writing up something first or doing up? I thought there.
Yes,
I can
think
do
you-
that. Happy to do so.
Okay,
Madam Mayor?
yes.
If you could direct that towards especially Leavenworth, the theme, the idea that our downtown is historic and the city had a long history of logging being the financial backer of how it became. If we could look at how that would play into a possible law that would guide us through the legal challenges that would be before us without causing any problems with infringing people's freedom of speech, but still protecting that aesthetic so that we don't go too far outside of it, but still have some color in our murals.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to me that this has to have been resolved somewhere. I mean, I've been to Williamsburg, Virginia, and all those shops look the same. I mean, there's none with, flamboyant colors, so.
And that can be addressed in your design standards, right? Which there is a tie back in the mural code to your design standards, especially in your historic downtown.
All right.
Where are those design standards located within this municipal code proposal?
So
Ashton, isn't there a reference? Sorry, go ahead.
I don't think it's specifically referenced in the municipal code, and I don't think it was specifically referenced in the municipal code as it's written now. It's referenced in other chapters, and I believe it applies across the board to any development in the central business district.
Okay. But where are we allowed to do murals and signs within the city? Is that just within the central business district, or could we put one?
Technically, they can be placed anywhere, I believe, as the code is written right now, but the central business district currently sets the content-based regulations that we are looking to revise.
All right. I'd like to talk more about this and kind of dive into it and go into those regulations a little bit more. I'd rather not. I mean, we have a lot of murals that definitely need to be updated and refreshed, and paintings go bad when they're on the side of a brick building, but without necessarily just completely veering off topic of what the history of the town is.
We could kick this to a committee if you'd like to do that. Have the
Yes.
committee talk about it, make recommendations, and bring that back to the council. But I would need a motion from somebody to.
Would it
Sta-
get to be members of the council on it?
It would depend upon which committee it's kicked.
Oh, one of the current committees.
Yeah,
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Could we hear back from Nikki first and then decide what we'd like to do with it?
absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, so did you hear that, Nikki? That they're waiting to hear back from you, what you have to state before we move forward with this?
Yes, I sure did.
Okay, perfect. All right, then with that, we will close this and move on to the next. And Ashton, thank you so much. I know you've put a lot of time and effort into this, a lot of research. This has not been not an easy ordinance to put together. As you've heard the council discuss, there's a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, and yet there could be some really great joy and wonderful things that come out of it. So thank you so much for your work on it and your continued work on it.
Yes, I'm excited. Lots of research to go into it. And thank you, Madam Mayor, and the rest of the council members for letting me speak.
You're welcome. Thank you, Ashton. Okay, moving on to the 2025 master fee schedule. This is Resolution 115524. It's a first read, and Kelly, this is yours.
Good evening, council. First, just want to say thank you for passing the budget. That's very helpful to get that moving forward this close to the end of the year. Next item I have to present, as the mayor stated, is the 2025 master fee schedule. So just for some background, instead of including all the various fees throughout the municipal code, the various different areas in the code, we condensed it into one spot into our master fee schedule, and generally updated at least once a year. Last time we updated it was in June of 2024. Included on the agenda item summary is just a brief summary of the items we have changed, and then in the further pages are the changes we actually made. So the first change you'll see is the solid waste ordinance that was passed earlier. So this just incorporates what council has already approved into the master fee schedule, as well as the sewer and stormwater ordinances also passed at the previous council meeting. There were no changes to park reservation fees. There was some changes to building and construction. There's an attachment included in there for traffic impact fees. Those have been increased by the Federal Highway Administration's National Construction Cost Index. We've also made some changes no changes to attachment B, which is the building planning and engineering fee schedule. For the park impact fees per unit, that has been increased by a measure of CPI. No changes to the cemetery. We've made a couple changes to the public records request as we get that system has evolved, so we've made some changes in that schedule. We've also included a new attachment to the master fee schedule, which is the fire department training facility fee schedule as well. This is a first read, so we can bring it back. We did notice one discrepancy in the cemetery that we do need to resolve. There's just an inconsistency in one of the sections that we'll resolve and highlight for a second read for you all.
So this is just an overview. It's the first read. We will bring this back. Unless somebody wanted to move forward with the motion, but it sounds like there needs to be a correction in the cemetery first. Right.
That
Okay,
is
so we'll bring that back then. Okay, so thank you, Kelly.
Madam Mayor.
I just want to state that it's 7:56. We're coming up on the 8 o'clock hour. We do have in our governance for City Council that we go up until 8 o'clock. If you want to move beyond 8 o'clock, I will need a motion to do that.
Madam Mayor, I believe the motion has always been that we stay until the business is done. We made it.
We still need a motion.
I'll motion to stay past 8.
Okay, thank you. Perfect. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, perfect. Okay, go ahead, Councilman Henderson, you
Thank
had a
you.
question?
Yes, Kelly, would it be too much trouble to highlight the changes in between when we approved this in June and when we're reapproving it in red?
Yeah, we can do that. How it's currently presented is the green, and then the second page is the previous items. But we could do that additional work.
It just makes it easier to see it side by side, instead of
Yeah.
scrolling up and down.
Yeah, I mean, the hard part is formatting, but we can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on. Okay, next item is the contract amendment, and this is for the new city prosecution contract for the services. This is a first read. Charlie, did you want to go over this with them?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Johnson, Council. So this particular item is an amendment to our prosecution contract. So we're required to have a prosecutor that the city employs, as well as an indigent defense firm. And for prosecution, we've worked with this firm, Zacher, Stock, and Krebs, for a couple of years now. They've done a really good job in my discussions with the police department. And our contract includes basically a 4% increase each year. That's the current contract we have in place with them. And that contract has at least another year on it. I've included a copy of the contract. The firm requested an increase in the amount of their contract going into the next year of an additional 4.3%. And this is regarding wage pressure that they're experiencing, particularly in Snohomish County, where the Snohomish County has decided to significantly increase the amount that they are paying their folks. So they're having to pay additional to try to retain their people and be competitive in the market. They have a lot of different clients throughout Snohomish County as well as here in Skagit County, and they have requested this increase of all of their contracts. So I'm recommending that we need to amend our contract. I'm recommending that we go ahead and apply this increase with our prosecution firm. If we weren't to do it, there is a possibility the firm may decide not to do business with the city. It's not clear.
Okay. So other questions? Go ahead, Councilman Burns.
Thank you for that, Charlie. And I appreciate that you're saying they're doing good. Chief McElwraith, your officer's happy to see their cases getting prosecuted and success rate that's acceptable?
Yeah, their firm is doing a really good job with our prosecution. We're happy with their services.
Okay.
I'd like to continue on with them. We've built a relationship with them now, so.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilwoman Kesty?
I'm sorry, I'm really confused on this, so for clarification, are we having to raise it because we're using a firm that is in a different county that they're raising their rates, and that's why we're having to pay more?
This firm is multi-county, so they're doing business in definitely in Skagit and in Snohomish counties.
Where are they located?
They're located in Snohomish County.
So why are we using someone in Snohomish and not in Skagit?
We did an RFP, and this was a firm that replied to us, and the council awarded the contract to them. And they do really good work. We found them to be a good partner to date, but we're currently under contract with them. They've requested an increase in writing to their contract, and when we do an RFP, we can't just limit it geographically to one area. So we put it out statewide.
And so they're located there, and they're asking more money for us because they're paid more.
They're basically asking for more money because the market is requiring them to pay more money of their people.
And here in Skagit County, nobody said that they wanted to be a part of us?
Correct. When we did this previously. We'll have another opportunity to do an RFP in the future, and we may find that we get some more responses, but we did not at the time.
I had a question.
Just
So,
one.
oh, I'm sorry.
Councilman Henderson had a question.
Yes, thank you. How long have we had these guys for?
I believe it's been a couple of years. I'm going to look at the contract because it's included in here.
Okay.
By recollection.
Because I was just curious when the last time we gave them an increase was, because CPI is 3.1 this year, and
Yep.
I don't remember what it was last year. 4% doesn't seem like an awful lot, but I just wanted to kind of make sure that they weren't getting like 9% and then 8% and then.
No, they've been locked in at this amount, 4%, since we initiated the contract with them.
Okay.
And it was back in 2022, October, roughly November, I think, when we let the contract, but that's when they applied to our RFP, was October.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Cock.
Just a question and then an observation. So they want 4% on top of the 4% in the contract? Is that what they're saying?
Correct. This 1 year, they're asking for 4.3% on top of the 4%. So it'd be a total of 8.3% going into 2025.
Could they escape the contract if we said no?
Yeah, they have the ability to cancel the contract if we say no.
I think the concern I have is, as we heard from our police chief, is that these folks are doing a good job, and apparently the only one who responded to the RFP, so I think we'd be in a dicey situation if we didn't go along. I don't like being pressured, but we are.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think we were given a couple RFPs at the time, and they were the cheapest one that we had. So I think we're still getting a good deal from what the services we're getting.
Are you looking for a motion tonight, Charlie?
If the council's so inclined, certainly a motion be helpful. Otherwise, I'll put it on the consent agenda at the next meeting. And just to clarify, the date of the contract execution was December 16th, 2022.
I'll make that motion reluctantly.
Okay. So we have a motion by Councilman Cock. Do I have a second?
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So motion by Councilman Cock, a second by Councilman Burns to authorize the mayor to enter into a contract with Zackerstock and Krebs, Inc., PS, when and if the city council is ready to do so. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. Okay. All right. Okay, so we've come to the end of that business. We do need to go into closed section to discuss a collective bargaining agreement. But first, I do need to end the meeting. So if there is nothing else pressing and no opposition, I will adjourn the meeting at this time. Thank you.